recording. All right. Looks like we are online. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahaihi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to many students watching or attending our satsangs online. Let me just check this, make sure everything is working. Looks like it's working. All right. So we continue on our Sunday morning satsang to take questions. For our local audience, we'll alternate between taking questions from our online students and from our local students. But sitting here, our 20 or 30 students, in the next week, several thousand students will watch this this satsang. So we're getting many more questions from outside. So we'll take your questions, but perhaps take more questions from our online students. Okay, first question comes from Sanjay. Sanjay lives in Mumbai. Sanjay asks, salutations on the auspicious occasion of Guru Purnima. Nice to have our satsang today on Guru Purnima. Nice to spend this time with all of you. Sanjay's question, can you please elaborate on nidhidhyasana and suggest practices pertaining to the same? Nidhidhyasana is a practice, so we need to talk about the practice of nidhidhyasana. But first, what is nidhidhyasana? It may be a new term for some of you. It's such an important practice. In fact, the practice of Vedanta really can be summarized in 3 steps or stages: Shravana, Manana, and nidhidhyasana. Shravana, often mistranslated as listening, which happens to be the literal meaning of the word. Listening cannot be shravana because, as we say in American English, if it goes in one ear and out the other, that's obviously not shravana. Even if you understand everything I say, that's not shravana. It's not shravana to merely understand what I say. What is shravana is to use what I say in your process of atma vichara, self-inquiry, which takes place now at the time of listening. That's shravana. Shravana means during the class, you are intended to be engaged in a practice of self-inquiry using the words of the Guru and Scripture to guide that process of self-inquiry. Properly understood, that is Shravana, the first of our 3 practices in Advaita Vedanta. The second, Manana. Manana is you translate it however you want. I don't think there's any good translation. Often reflection is given. That doesn't make sense. There's no one word translation for Manana, nor, in fact, all the 3, Shravana, Manana, nidhidhyasana, have no one-word translations. Manana is a process of removing doubts. That's the simplest way of putting it. As you listen to these classes, as you listen to these teachings, naturally doubts come up. In fact, if doubts don't come up, there's a problem. You're listening uncritically if doubts don't come up. You're just accepting what I say without thinking about it. There's always someone, there are, I've joked before that sometimes there are people in the back of the classroom that sit like this And they reject everything you say. This happens in some situations. There are people, closed minds, sitting in the back with their arms folded like this. But there are people who also listen, the opposite kind of people, who listen uncritically. And they just absorb, they just agree, ha ha ha, gee. Everything, everything you say is fine. They just swallow it whole, as it were. So that's not how these teachings work. Just a funny memory. I was once in India teaching. I don't remember some place in South, it might have been Chennai, it was South India. And I remember in the back of the room, there were some old Indian ladies sitting there in the back row. They weren't sitting like this. They were sitting there, of course, in their 9-yard saris or whatever they're wearing, and listening. And they were smiling so broadly, and they were just enjoying as I was teaching. And of course, they didn't know a word of English. So why were they smiling? They liked the idea of this white fellow teaching Advaita Vedanta. It just made them feel really good. They were listening, but not listening critically. So if you're listening critically, you will have questions. If you don't have questions, you're not listening critically. Okay? So manana, shravana is listening, but listening, as I said, not listening and using the teachings to guide a process of self-inquiry that takes place in the class and after the class. But even during the class, that process of self-inquiry is meant to take place. If it doesn't, if you're only here to gather information, you're missing the boat, as we say in American English. Manana then, removing any doubts that may arise, and then coming to Sanjay's question, nidhidhyasana. Again, no one-word translation. Best we can do perhaps is Vedantic contemplation, but then what is Vedantic contemplation? It's a process of removing habitual identification with your body and mind. There are other aspects to it as well, but simply put, you have lived under the spell of ignorance from the time you were born, and that ignorance has led you to be completely identified with your body and mind. This is me. This is where we all start out in spiritual life. I am this body and mind complex. Eventually, these teachings lead you to discover that, oh, I'm not this body and mind. That's through Shravana, you discover that I am the consciousness by which this body and mind are known. So this is Shravana, you discover that. It's not information. To know that consciousness is different from body and mind, that is information. To know that, listen to the difference between these two statements. Consciousness is different from this body and mind. I am the consciousness who is different from this body and mind. Completely different statements. Consciousness is different from this body and mind. Third person information. I am the consciousness who is different from this body and mind. First person. That's Shravana, is to listen with that first person orientation, then to remove doubts, manana. Finally, nidhidhyasana, you've lived under this spell of ignorance, you've been identified with this body and mind for how many years? And when you finally discover that you're not the body and mind, tell me, will that identification with the body and mind just instantly disappear, vanish, like the fog, they say, when the sun comes up? Unrealistic to think that our minds can change so rapidly. By the way, modern neuroscience really supports this. Modern neuroscience, I catch myself, whenever I say modern neuroscience, Is there such a thing as ancient neuroscience? There's no such thing as modern neuroscience. Neuroscience, okay. You can get the idea. I'm a little fussy about words and language anyway. So, neuroscience has shown very clearly that whatever happens in our mind is due to changes of the, whatever, let's just talk about memory. And whatever our knowledge and memory is physically imprinted in your brain through the alteration of concentration of certain neurotransmitters at the synapses of your neurons. There are chemical changes that take place in the brain through which knowledge takes place. So, when you get instantly enlightened, will all those chemicals instantly change? Unrealistic. That's not the way physical things work. Biological entities change gradually. So this is a not modern neuroscientific, but a neuroscientific basis for something we know very well, and that is our minds are habitual in nature to be identified with your body and mind out of habit is natural following the discovery of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma, separate from your body and mind. So for the sake of removing that habitual identification, we find the practice of nidhidhyasana, Vedantic contemplation, extremely important. So to remove that habitual identification. He asks, can you suggest practices for doing the same? The practice is called nidhidhyasana. I don't think it's appropriate to go into that in the satsang, but let me suggest if you want to practice nidhidhyasana, go to either our website or my YouTube channel and listen to the classes on Shankaracharya's Upadesha Sahasri, Chapter 10. Shankara's Upadesha Sahasri, Chapter 10, is the best place I've seen nidhidhyasana described. It's brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. So instead of talking about it further here, if you're interested in a practice, first of all, before you look at that chapter, look at my, I have at least one video on nidhidhyasana. So look at the videos first. There's one with that lion story that's really important. So make sure you see the video on the lion story and then go and study chapter 10 of Upadesha Sastri. This question is from Sukhtave. Sukhtave. I think it's a Maharashtrian name, but I've not seen that name before. Doesn't say where he lives, but I might not be in Maharashtra. Anyway, I have a question on karma. We have current prarabdha karma that put us into this life, correct? So we are all born due to prarabdha karmas, so that we can learn and exhaust our previous karmas from the past life, not the past lives, but from past lives. So your prarabdha karma consists not necessarily of your past life karma, but all the past lives. A little bit of karma from all of those past lives contribute to your prarabdha karma. And in this life, we're given opportunities to right the wrong and learn from what we did in past lives. I'm not sure. This is Suktave's thinking, but some people have the idea that we're born to learn a lesson. That's not what the doctrine of karma teaches. But it's kind of like a new agey kind of thinking, that God put us here to learn an important lesson. What is the lesson I'm supposed to learn? That sounds wonderful, sounds really cool, but it's not what the ancient rishis taught, and it's not what the doctrine of karma teaches. If you want to believe it, go for it. But it's got nothing to do with the doctrine of karma. It's got nothing to do with Vedanta. So we're born in a mechanical way to exhaust karma. Because we have consequences, results of past karmas didn't get fructified, so we're born to fructify. According to the doctrine of karma, you're not born to learn anything, you're born to fructify karma. Now, learning is important. If you want to stop doing this again and again and again and again, getting reborn and reborn and reborn, what was that? They make a joke out of the Christian bumper sticker, born again. The Hindu bumper sticker, reborn again. Or born again and again. Anyway, that was an old joke. I'm surprised you're laughing at it. It's such an old joke. Okay. I can get away with that anyway. It was good. So learning is not part of the doctrine of karma. It is part of Advaita Vedanta. If you want to get out of this cycle of birth and rebirth, you have to discover your true nature as Satchidananda Atma, destroy ignorance, become enlightened. But it's not because of karma. Okay. Situations arise, let's see. Here's the question. Are the situations we encounter in life, are these the product of past karmas, or are they the product of our choices we make in life? The situations we encounter. For example, you're sitting here today. You came to our ashram on Guru Purnima, nice, or you're watching this video. Is that a matter of free will, that you chose to come here, or is it a matter of past karmas? This is a trick question. Listen again. Did you choose to attend this satsang, or are you here because of your past karmas? The answer is yes. Trick question. Both. That's true in every aspect of our lives. We have free will. You can't deny the existence of free will. We all experience ourselves as being willful beings. We make choices, we make decisions. Some are right and some are wrong. But it's equally true that our past karmas influence us in what choices we make. You know, if you never heard of Vedanta in your life, because of your karma, you wouldn't choose to come here, or you wouldn't choose to watch this video. So both are true. It's a common mistake to think that it's one or the other. You know, people have this. Have you noticed how people like to be very black and white in their thinking? You know, it's either this or it's that. It's either karma or it's free will. Pardon me in advance, you're either Democrat or you're Republican. You're either a Trumper or you're a never Trumper. Black and white. And this black and white thinking is a problem. And not just in politics, it's a problem in our spiritual lives as well. It's not that it's either karma or it's free will, both. So this is, and by the way, it's important to understand the doctrine of karma properly. Most people, I'm surprised, I'm not surprised, the doctrine of karma is actually quite subtle and fairly complex. And it's natural that most people have a fairly superficial understanding of the doctrine of karma for that reason. But based on that superficial understanding, a lot of mistakes are made. So if you want to understand it properly, again, on my YouTube channel, there's a series of videos on the doctrine of karma. If you watch those videos, you won't have all these misconceptions. about the doctrine of karma. Okay. This is an interesting question from Bennett, who lives in Melbourne, Australia. And Bennett observes, there's no mention of Radha in the scriptures. Who's next to Sri Krishna? Here. Do we get that? Oh, don't. No, the camera doesn't go there. Sorry. Trying to show the Shore students. I'm checking. We'll leave that. So Radha stands next to Krishna on our altar here and in our temple over there. And he says there's no mention of Radha in any scriptures, not even in the Mahabharata. I think he meant to say Bhagavata Purana. So the Bhagavata Purana is where most of the stories about Sri Krishna are found in the Bhagavata Purana. I think there's a reference to Radha, but her name as such doesn't come even in the Bhagavata Purana. It comes in later literature. So Bennett says, I understand that we need to consider Radha as a form of Ishvara instead of taking the literal meaning in Puranic stories. I think Bennett, is referring to something I've said many, many times, and that is that the scriptures, like Bhagavata Purana, are full of stories, and these stories are not historical truths. I've said this many times. That Radha existed as a physical person, we don't know. The evidence from our scriptures do not prove the existence of Radha. She may have existed. I'm not saying she didn't exist. I'm just saying that you cannot take the scriptures as being proof of the existence of Radha's of Radha. Krishna's another matter. We know Krishna existed because we have his teachings. But Radha's and Sri Krishna's teachings are found in the Bhagavata Purana. We're studying them every Saturday. This Uddhava Gita we're studying. His teachings, Sri Krishna's teachings, are in the Mahabharata. We study the Bhagavad Gita, which is a small part. So there's no question about Krishna existing as a historical person. But Radha, there's no proof. There's no disproof either, right? Both are the same. But now, how then should we? He says there are a lot of controversy, discussions going on between various kata vachakas and devotees on this topic. I'd like to understand your perspective. So when we have seen references to various deities and various mythological stories, I've often said they're mythological in nature. They are not historical truths. And that's always been my perspective. Historical truth doesn't mean, this is such an important point. If I say the Bhagavata Purana contains stories that are not historically true, does it mean that there's nothing of value in the Bhagavata Purana? I didn't say that, right? And a good way of illustrating it is like this. Books of fiction convey powerful truths. Did you ever read a novel and found your life transformed by what was taught in that novel? To convey truth doesn't require a historically true story. You can put truth into a fictional story. It's still true. Whether that truth is conveyed through historically true stories or through mythological stories makes no difference whatsoever. Notice what I am saying is nothing need be rejected. We love works of fiction. We love stories. Why do you think our scriptures are full of stories? So that you'll read them. I'm being very honest with you. If all of our stories were dry and philosophical, who would study them? No one. So our forefathers and foremothers were wise enough to know that in the future we all love stories. So all of these teachings are put in the context of stories. But stories does not mean historic records of historical events. Whatever were the historical events is a different subject matter. Some things may be historically true, many things may not be historically true. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Whether Sri Krishna and Arjuna really, whether Rama and Sita really flew through the skies on their celestial chariot on the way back to Ayodhya after Ravana was defeated in Lanka, whether that's a historically true event or not, doesn't matter. And in my opinion, to argue about its historical validity or lack of validity is a complete waste of time, in my opinion. You don't have to agree with me on this, but I think people who love to argue about these things, I really feel like they're wasting their time. So, coming back now to Radha. There's no historical evidence for her. She doesn't even occur in the Puranas, our main scriptures, in Bhagavata Purana. I'm not sure about. She must be present. I bet Padma. I haven't checked actually. I know that there's only a kind of a reference to her in the Bhagavata Purana. I know that. Whether she's present in other Puranas, I'm not sure. I haven't checked it. Padma Purana, we'd have to go and look at these other Puranas. But one thing we know for sure is she's a very prominent figure in later scriptures, in later texts, more than any place else in the Bengali literature of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. So this is a tradition that is so focused on Krishna bhakti, and Radha gets the royal treatment in that literature. Not only the Bengali literature, but anyway, that was very prominent, especially with the disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He lived about 500 years ago. Prior to Chaitanya Prabhu, Radha was virtually unknown. It was only 500 years ago, with the advent of Chaitanya and his bhakti movement that we now call Gaudiya Vaishnava. Gaudiya means basically Bengali Vaishnavism. And she becomes such an important figure, even though there's no historical evidence for her. Now, Bennett says, I understand that we need to consider Radha as a form of Ishvara. Well, if you are a Bengali following Chaitanya's Gaudiya Vaishnavism, you would throw up at this statement. Because this statement suggests Radha is to be taken figuratively as a form of Ishvara, not in Bengali Vaishnavism, not in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. In that Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Radha is to be taken as a historical person. Absolutely must be taken as a historical person. That's the nature of that particular tradition. And here's a place we have to recognize that Hinduism is this huge umbrella under which many different traditions exist side by side, and these traditions do not all teach the same thing. They're all part of the same Hindu tradition, they're all based on the ancient Vedas, but what they teach is very different. So what Advaita Vedanta teaches and what Gaudiya Vaishnavism teaches is very different. Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a teaching specially designed is the wrong word, a teaching whose special focus is the cultivation of bhakti. Notice in the Advaita Vedanta, devotion is important as a means to an end. In Gaudiya Vaishnavism, bhakti is the end. That's pretty big difference, right? So in Advaita Vedanta, which is our primary subject of study here, bhakti prepares you to gain moksha. But in this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition of Chaitanya and his followers, bhakti is the goal. There's no other goal other than cultivating bhakti. And for the sake of cultivating bhakti, the followers of this tradition accept these stories on face value and revel in the stories. The stories, by the way, the stories are just amazing and delightful. Very, what to say. But these stories are emotionally effective only when you accept them as being historical events. And so for those, Bennett is asking for my opinion. As an Advaita Vedantin, and as someone who's not born in Bengal, obviously, I cannot accept those stories on face value. It doesn't work for me because of the two reasons I just gave. But in my opinion, for those born in Bengal, or for those born into this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, for those who do, in fact, accept the historicity of these stories and revel in these wonderful stories, I think they have a wonderful blessing that I will never have. Honestly. I wish I could just accept those stories on face value and immerse myself in that wonderful tradition. It's called Rasika. It's just such a lively, a very intensely devotional tradition. I really think those who are born in Bengal or those who are born in this tradition, they have a unique and wonderful blessing because they can take all these stories of not just Radha, but the gopis, not just the gopis, but the sakhis. So there are 8 gopis. Each of these 8 gopis are associated with 8 sakhis. So they have all these, and all of these are historical figures in their tradition. And there are stories about all of them, wonderful stories of all of their dalliances, playtimes, anyway, wonderful stories. Anyway, so in that tradition, Radha is taken as a historical person, and that is wonderful for promoting bhakti. In Advaita Vedanta, it's difficult to accept the historicity of these stories, so then any stories are taken as stories which are meant to teach a truth. So basically, how then, just we'll finish up in this, on this question. How does a Vedantin then look upon those stories from the standpoint of Vedanta? From the standpoint of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, they're historically true, and they're wonderfully effective for cultivating bhakti. From the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta, the stories are not accepted as being historical, but these stories all teach the same thing: Krishna bhakti, devotion to Sri Krishna. And that's something every Advaita Vedantin can accept. If not Krishna, whatever is your Ishta Devata, your chosen form of God, or however you envision Ishvara, bhakti is crucial even in Advaita Vedanta. We can't say it's unimportant, because we can, even though bhakti, according to Advaita Vedanta, even though bhakti alone won't make you enlightened, it's equally true, without bhakti, you won't get enlightened. I'll say that again. According to Advaita Vedanta, bhakti alone won't make you enlightened, but on the other hand, without bhakti, forget it. What is it? They make a joke about this Brooklyn accent. Forget about it. Forget about it. What is that? Forget about it. Anyway, I don't know this Brooklyn accent. So this is enough on bhakti. Let me pause this. Yeah, this is a good place to stop. Do we have any questions here? Because we'll alternate. There's a question in the back. You'll need the microphone. Please.
Hello, Swami T. I wish you all the best for Guru Purnima. I am so grateful to have you as a teacher. So all my best wishes. And my question is really about anger. Lately, I've been getting very angry, and I don't know. Any advice?
Yeah. The problem of anger can be addressed. I got it. It's okay. Problem of anger can be addressed at two levels. One is at a psychological level, and there's plenty of psychological advice for overcoming anger. Many self-help books. By the way, you should never put those self-help. Some people, just another self-help books. Do you know professional therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists include those self-help books as being in their therapies? They are officially acknowledged. They call it bibliotherapy. How's that? Bibliotherapy is a fancy name for reading self-help books. There's a lot of practical, helpful wisdom in those books. And to be honest, for most people, that's the first avenue of solving the problem of anger, because there are so many psychological, emotional reasons for anger that are not addressed in Vedanta. Vedanta is not a system of psychology. It's not a therapeutic teaching. So for the majority of problems with anger, the proper therapy, of course there are therapists, there are psychologists, but in my opinion, these self-help books contain a lot of good wisdom. Of course, go for the mainstream, the really good ones, the ones that have made it to the, they say, New York Times top 10. So those are good books, by the way. If something makes it to the New York Times top 10, it's not an accident. There's something of value in those books, so those kinds of self-help books. Vedanta's approach to the problem of anger is in a very fundamental way, and it's kind of the long-term solution to the problem. Short-term solution would be self-help books, or simply just talk to a friend and get it off your chest or whatever it is, so to speak. Those are practical short-term solutions, but none of those solutions will ever completely free you from anger. No amount of therapy and no amount of reading self-help books will ever make you completely free from anger. On the other hand, complete freedom from anger is indeed possible through these Vedantic teachings. And the way it works is this. One of the root causes for anger is we feel threatened or transgressed upon. Our boundaries are violated. Someone is doing something that they shouldn't do. So we feel in one way or the other, we feel threatened. If you didn't feel threatened by anything, could you feel angry? Think about that just for a moment, an interesting mental exercise. Suppose nothing threatened you, nothing made you upset, nothing bothered you. How could you feel angry? What would you get angry about? So Vedanta addresses a problem of anger in a very fundamental way by helping you discover that your true nature, as Satchidananda Atma, as pure consciousness, your essential nature can't be threatened by anything, can't be affected by anything. And by the way, that's not a matter of belief. To believe that nothing can threaten you, and then somebody threatens you, the belief won't work. It's not a matter of belief. It has to be a personal discovery of the truth of Atma being utterly unaffected by anything in the world. This is a truth to be discovered, not a matter of belief. A truth to be discovered. And for most people, discovering that truth is really a long-term project. So to answer your question, the long-term solution to the problem of anger is definitely found in these teachings of Advaita Vedanta. But the short-term solution can be found in many pragmatic ways, including self-help books. Okay? All right, let's take some more questions here. There's a question from Juan. Juan lives in Miami. Juan says, I love your channel, videos, and your laughter. That's nice. We've been laughing a lot today. Pertaining to consciousness, it's often said that the conscious mind is only the tip of the iceberg compared to our subconscious mind. Some say that some say it might only be 10% of our mind is conscious and 90% of our mind is unconscious. If we are consciousness, where does the subconscious fall? And this is a problem of mixing up two definitions of consciousness. So the definition of consciousness that Juan is using is a definition used mostly in psychology and perhaps in neuroscience. In psychology, by the way, subconscious is a specific psychological term introduced by Freud and Jung, and it has to do with aspects of your mind of which you are not aware of at this point in time, right now. Something that's hidden from you, like memories. Vedanta doesn't even have a word for subconscious. Vedanta will have words for memories, for mental impressions, but there's no concept similar to subconscious. In fact, the term subconscious is 150 years old. Freud. Before Freud, there was no concept of subconscious. I'm not saying there was no subconscious. I'm saying that Freud's usage of the word started about 150 years ago. And from the standpoint of psychology then, subconscious refers to, in Vedanta we take it as a memory or a samskara, a mental impression. No such thing as but what it means, it belongs to the mind. Memory is part of the mind. Subconscious, from a Vedantic standpoint, what Freud and Jung called subconscious has nothing to do with consciousness. Has everything to do with the mind. Subconscious is a part of the mind in psychology. In neuroscience, subconscious is a part of your brain. But in both cases, subconscious has nothing to do with the Vedantic teaching about consciousness. So, according to psychology, subconscious is part of your mind But consciousness has nothing to do with, I won't say nothing to do with your mind. Consciousness is completely independent of your mind. Consciousness is that by which the mind is known. When something bubbles up from your memory, bubbles up, in fact, Jung liked this expression, Carl Jung, who was a disciple of Freud, had this idea that conscious thoughts bubble up from the unconscious. This was his theory. So when something bubbles up from the subconscious mind, you become conscious of it or aware of it in a Vedantic sense. So what Freud and Jung considered to be the conscious mind is what we wouldn't call conscious mind. We'd say the mind of which you are conscious. Anyway, some technical distinctions. Next question from Vishwanath. Vishwanath lives in Kanchipuram, beautiful temple town in Tamil Nadu. Vishwanath asks, in earlier classes you said that Atma, as consciousness, can't do anything. And therefore, consciousness has no intent to observe whatever is happening in your mind. No, I'm choosing these words very carefully. I'm kind of editing Vishwanath's question. But then and I'm just going to paraphrase. So Vishwanath asks, if consciousness can't do anything, how can consciousness observe what's happening in your mind? Good question. Consciousness can't do anything. So how can consciousness as Sakshi be the observer of what's happening in your mind? The awareful witness of what's happening in your mind. The answer to that, some of you know, the answer is to observe is not an action. Right now, you're sitting, you're watching me. I presume here you're sitting. At home, I presume you're sitting down. Most people sit when they watch videos, not everyone. But so right now you are sitting down and your eyes are open and you see me. Those of you who are here in the ashram, you see me in person. Those of you who are watching online, you see me on some kind of screen in front of you. You're sitting, your eyes are open. Now tell me, what do you have to do, in addition to sitting with your eyes open, what do you have to do to see me? No. Your eyes are open, you see me. You may have to, if your eyes are closed, if you fell asleep, happens, you might have to open your eyes. But then opening the eyes is not the same as seeing me. Opening your eyes is an action. Seeing me is not an action. You see how this answers Vishwanath's question. And that is, for consciousness to reveal the activities of your mind, consciousness doesn't perform any action. Consciousness just makes the contents of your mind known, reveals the what's ever happening in your mind. To observe or to witness is not an action. Next question from Audrey. Audrey lives in Sebastopol, California. I think Northern California. She has a question about mental states and how mental states are different from a state of consciousness. There are mental states. Waking state, right now. Dream state, when you fall asleep. And deep sleep, the dreamless state. These are three states. This is I'm glad Audrey's asked this question because it's a very common confusion that there are states of consciousness. There is one unchanging consciousness. This is what Advaita Vedanta teaches. One unchanging consciousness that reveals three states of your mind: waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. It's your mind that undergoes states, not consciousness. Consciousness just shines, reveals. Unchanging consciousness. And that consciousness is unchanging is a crucial and central teaching of Advaita Vedanta. If consciousness changes, look at this. If consciousness changes, it's subject to suffering. Therefore, Vedanta is useless. If consciousness is subject to change and suffering, Vedanta can't do you any good at all. Don't bother. Go home. Or if you're already home, turn off your turn off the device you're watching. Really. It is that important in Advaita Vedanta, that central, the teaching, that consciousness is unchanging. Unchanging consciousness has no states. Your mind has a waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. With that in mind, so to speak, we go to Audrey's question, and there are in the waking state, we experience empirical reality, the world around us, what we call vyavaharika satta, to use the proper Sanskrit terms. In the dream state, which is, again, is the dream state a state of consciousness? I hope you can all say no. Dream state is a state of the mind. Consciousness has no states. So in the dream state, we experience a projected reality, the reality of our dreams. We call pratibhasika satta, projected reality, which is less real than this reality. Then in deep sleep, and this is where I think Audrey gets into some trouble. When the mind is in the state of deep sleep, what happens to consciousness? Consciousness is unchanging. Unchanging consciousness remains the same in the waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. In the dream, and we've talked about this so many times, it's so crucial, but some people haven't gotten this message yet, so let me put it very clearly. In deep sleep, you are as conscious as you are right now. The difference is there's nothing to be conscious of. There's no change in consciousness. You are 100% conscious in the waking state, 100% conscious in dream state, 100% conscious when the mind is in the state of deep sleep, but in the state of deep sleep, there's nothing to be conscious of. Very clear? Okay. So then if you are awake in a waking state, you are aware of empirical reality. In a dream state, you're aware of a projected reality. In the deep sleep state, you are conscious of what? We just said it. Conscious of nothing. You're conscious neither of empirical reality, nor are you conscious of the dream state, projected reality. So, and she mentions turiya here, the fourth state. And the term turiya does mean fourth state, and it causes tremendous confusion. Obviously, there can't be a fourth state of consciousness. If there's not a first and second, and if there aren't three states of consciousness, how can Turiya be a fourth? The term Turiya comes in the Upanishads, and it refers to a fourth that is different from the three states of mind, which means the fourth is not a state. It is the fourth in addition to three states of mind, which means the fourth is consciousness itself. This is almost always misunderstood. The fourth is not a state. States come and go. The fourth is a fourth in addition to three states. The fourth is not a state. The fourth is just consciousness and nothing but consciousness. Very commonly misunderstood. I hope that answers Audrey's question. A couple more, then we'll conclude. This question comes from Amit, who lives in India. Amit asks, do qualities like love, compassion, creativity, and intelligence pertain to Ishvara, or are they present in Brahman too? I presume you're referring to Nirguna Brahman, and by definition, Nirguna Brahman has no qualities. That's what Nirguna, that's what Nirguna means. However, qualities are present in Saguna Brahman. That's what Saguna means. Saguna Brahman means Brahman with qualities. What kind of qualities? Qualities like love, compassion, creativity, and intelligence. Qualities of Ishvara. In Advaita Vedanta, Saguna Brahman is a technical word we use for Ishvara. So just, I think more commonly, well, actually, we'll leave it at that. So Saguna Brahman is Ishvara. Next question from Gordon. Oh, this is interesting. And maybe we'll make this our last question. Yeah. Either last question or second to last question. We'll see how this one goes. Gordon lives in Scotland. His question is, many religions have a celibate clergy. So in the Hindu, clergy means means religious professional. It's kind of how it gets translated. A Hindu monk is am I professional? A professional Swami. I don't know what that means. And the term clergy, though, and if you look it up in a dictionary, I suppose it'll say a professional religious person. One for whom religion is their profession, is kind of how it's put in English. So, and clergy are celibate. In the Hindu tradition, monks are celibate. Here in the Christian tradition, it gets complicated, and this is apparently Gordon's background. Within the frame of modern psychology and psychotherapy, sex is spoken of as a basic human need. Correct. Every psychologist will admit sex is a normal human need, and yet, some religions treat sex as optional and dispensable. Wait a minute. If sex is a normal need, what religion can say it's dispensable if it's a normal need? The way Hinduism treats it is for non-swamis, non-sannyasis, sex is a normal part of life. It's just normal, not good, not bad. Notice the word normal doesn't mean good or bad. Normal means normal. It's not good, it's not bad. Normal means normal. Now, for a sannyasi, it's prohibited. But for a non-sannyasi, it's normal. But there's a problem. Gordon goes on to say, nevertheless, sexual desire apparently infiltrates and distorts the thinking and conduct of some clergy with affairs and abuses conducted in secret. Well, in India, without doubt, in India, around the world, there are a handful of sannyasis who have abused this cloth and have engaged in sexual activities which are absolutely prohibited, and it is adharmic, and it is, in some cases, extremely harmful to the other person. So there have been situations where the sannyasi is a guru, and there is say a male sannyasi, female shishya. There is a teacher-student relationship, and psychologists would say there is an imbalance of power in that relationship. These are not peers. The teacher has an elevated position. The student has a lesser position. There is a power imbalance, and wherever there is an imbalance, sexual contact is harmful. Harmful, because what happens is a person who wields the power, and even when the subject wants, I'm sorry to get a little bit elaborate about it, even when the student wants sex with the guru, it's still adharmic and it's still harmful, even if it's consensual. And this is, psychologists will say this 100%. Consensual sex where there is an imbalance of power is harmful. This is pure psychology, and it's harmful because it's not peers. There's an imbalance of power. Even if it's consensual, the consent has come about due to the imbalance of power. So harmful and adharmic. But it happens, which is not to justify it at all. And it happens because apparently there are some handful of sannyasis who haven't been able to. One of the prerequisites is dhamma, self-control. So if you don't have at least that degree of self-control, you have no right to be on a spiritual path. So it becomes an abuse. Whoever takes sannyasa becomes a Hindu monk who lacks dhamma, who lacks self-control. It's an abuse of the privilege of sannyasa. So, but Gordon is speaking from a Christian context, and it brings in something different. The Hindu tradition has done something very, I don't want to say Hinduism is better than Christianity, but this is one narrow place where I think Hinduism is better than Christianity. And that is, which means I'm not saying in general it's not true, but in this particular regard, I think it's very true. Because in the Hindu tradition, priests get married, right? In the Hindu tradition, priests get married. They have families. Good for them. They make a living doing rituals. Why not? Good. They do some good to society by helping people perform these rituals. Excellent. Including rituals of death, helping to comfort the family when someone is lost, and helping to deal with those rituals associated with death. In the Christian tradition, in the Roman, not Christian in general, in the Roman Catholic tradition, and I think Eastern Catholic tradition says, well, Orthodoxy, I think it's the same. No, not so. Thank you. Thanks for the correction. In the Roman Catholic tradition, which is one of the larger Christian sects, priests are forbidden from being married and having sex. Problem. As we said before, sex drive is natural. It's not good, it's not bad, it is natural. Well, in a Roman Catholic tradition, they insist on celibacy for their priests, which has been and continues to be a problem in the Roman Catholic Church, and they themselves admit it. Don't think I'm blasting them. The Roman Catholics themselves and their hierarchy, they admit it's a problem. Notice the distinction, and here's where the mistake comes. In the Roman Catholic tradition, there's a great amount of reverence for monks. And monks in the Catholic tradition are necessarily celibate. That's what being a monk is about. Just as in the Hindu tradition, monks are celibate, in the Roman Catholic tradition, monks are celibate. Excellent. Because the life of a monk is a life so narrowly dedicated to spiritual growth that there's no room for distractions. By the way, this is a humorous observation that I think is absolutely true. Celibacy for monks is commonly understood as to protect the monks from distraction. You've got it wrong. Because if the monk is really a monk, you don't have to tell the monk to be celibate. They'll be celibate. They don't want to be distracted. So celibacy is for the sake, not for the sake of protecting the monks, it's for the sake of protecting women from the monks. Honestly. It's to protect the women who could be abused by a monk who doesn't have it right. Excuse me. Okay. Somebody who's really a monk doesn't need to be protected. Women sometimes do need to be protected. But here's the last point here. In the Roman Catholic tradition, because of their high respect for monks, they have, in my opinion, by the way, I was raised in that tradition. I think they've made a big mistake by making their priests practice celibacy. They didn't always. In 1,000 years ago, I think priests were not required. I may be wrong about this, but celibacy of priests is not something fundamental in a biblical sense. So they have insisted on celibacy for their priests, and it creates a problem. And as I said, this is one place where Hinduism definitely takes a smarter path in allowing their priests to get married. I'd like to take one more question here because it's a really good question, then we'll finish up. This is a question from Kartik, who lives in Hyderabad. And let me just read it out because you'll see the problem. I seek your guidance in a matter that is deeply troubling me. I have a strong desire to become an actor, to lift myself and my family out of poverty, and to contribute to society by donating to the poor. However, I have also encountered teachings of Advaita Vedanta which emphasize renouncing material life as it contributes to Maya. Well, I have a desire to become an actor, to lift myself and let's do that second. The second part is the first step in Advaita Vedanta is not renouncing material life. That's the last step. When you have completely transcended worldliness, the last step is becoming a monk and renouncing worldly life. The first step is following dharma. Last step is renouncing material life. First step, follow dharma. Follow dharma means take care of your family. take care of yourself. But you can't take care of yourself if you renounce the material world. So, first step, follow Dharma, take care of yourself, take care of your family. Take care of your family means get a job. Get a job means get a job that you're qualified for. A realistic job. Most people are not going to qualify for a job as an actor. And Kartik admits, I have a strong desire to become an actor. I said the first, step 1, follow Dharma. Step 2, follow Dharma, don't follow your desires. It's karma yoga. First step, follow Dharma, take care of your family. Second step, if taking care of your family means putting aside your desires, that's what you have to do. Put aside your self-interest and follow Dharma. Get a job that's appropriate through which you can support your family. So these steps are important. So just to summarize that, last step, renounce the world. Step 1, follow Dharma. Step 2, set aside your personal desires and follow Dharma. Take care of your family. That's a good place for us to conclude. That was a really important question from Kartik. I'm glad he wrote. We'll end with a prayer. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha sarve santu niramayaha sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavit asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. See you next time.